Diversity. Few words warm the hearts of university faculty and administrators more. Anything connected with diversity is good. Any initiative, course, requirement, administrative position, program is ipso facto desirable, morally virtuous, and unassailable. I've heard one professor remark, "You could write the word diversity on a turd, and the faculty would vote for it." In the midst of all these warm, fuzzy feelings around anything connected with diversity, there's one problem. What the hell does diversity even mean? Nearly 20 years ago, I was part of some faculty discussion group where we were asked to define diversity. And an old physics professor simply said, "Diversity is having different things." That's it. And he was right. Diversity is having different things. Could be different sized marbles, various vegetables, competing ideologies. But then came the response of the dean. "Come on, you know what we mean." And that is the problem. I was a junior faculty member at the time, so I didn't say much. But I realized then what I've continued to observe ever since. The emperor has no clothes. Not many people on college campuses can actually define diversity. Or maybe I should say they don't want to define diversity. People talk about diversity in this imprecise, nebulous way while relying on the you-know-what-we-mean qualifier to avoid having to really engage with the challenges of human diversity. And we all know that there are serious challenges regarding how we talk about and negotiate human difference. A few years after that meeting, the faculty voted to require our annual departmental reports to include descriptions of contributions to diversity. During the discussion prior to the vote, I asked, what counts as diversity? For example, does a pro-life Catholic professor count as diversity? I never got an answer, but the turd was voted through. Since that time, we also created a statement on diversity and inclusiveness, and that would seem like a good place to define what we mean by this word. But what we put on paper has the same old problem. There's no definition, just examples. The university's history and heritage lead us to affirm the dignity and worth of all persons. Consequently, we must be vigilant to ensure that we do not exclude or marginalize individuals and groups because of such differences as gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, social class, marital and parental status, disability, age, religion, gender identity or expression, geography, and national origin. As Susquehanna seeks to embody the rich diversity of the human community, we commit ourselves to the full participation of persons who represent the breadth of human differences. Now, this isn't a bad statement, but there's a game being played here. When you don't actually define diversity, but just give examples, you can avoid the very real challenges of actually working within a diverse human society. You include types of diversity that you care about, but don't include the folks you don't want included. You notice what's missing from the list? Viewpoint diversity. And that is not just one category among many. That's the essential characteristic of human diversity. And it is viewpoint diversity that is dividing our society more than any other kind. That's the basis for the kind of tribalism that is tearing apart our country. And that is the serious challenge of difference that we need to be tackling. But for some reason, it's absent from the list. And since no one bothers to define diversity, but just lists the types that they want to see, we're not dealing with the biggest challenges that human difference presents us with. Viewpoint diversity. And it all begins with the inability or unwillingness to actually define diversity. And part of me suspects that folks don't want to provide a concrete definition, because that would mean having to admit that viewpoint diversity counts. And more than counts, it is really the essential strength and challenge of having genuine human diversity. Okay, so does all this really matter? Am I just being a pedantic and pugnacious professor pontificating about pointless particulars again? Maybe, but I don't think so. There are 3 reasons why we should speak of diversity more precisely. 1, educators should be able to speak well. It's our job to convey ideas clearly and to model gooder use of language for our students. If you want to have better conversations about difficult issues, then precise language is essential. If you're going to talk about certain types of diversity, then clarify what you mean. Are we talking about ethnic diversity, religious diversity, human diversity, biodiversity? Any conversation related to these issues is clarified by such qualifiers. Otherwise, we have more of those silly and inane discussions of diversity, where everyone is simply registering their virtue by cheering for diversity while not even knowing exactly what they're referring to. Second, diversity has become central to the employment and education of everyone on college and university campuses, and many other places as well. Applicants for jobs these days are required to submit a Statement of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Now, we don't have time to get to the ridiculous ways equity and inclusion are used these days, so one debacle at a time, please. But that's what's required up front. Then, once hired, promotion, tenure, funding, moral standing in the community, these are all tied up with diversity. But what counts? Damned if I know. If I write an article about Buddhism in America, does that count? If so, why? Because Buddhists are a religious minority here? The same could be said of Muslims, Mormons, Jews, Wiccans, Cumberland Presbyterians. Which topics get me diversity points and which don't? And who gets to decide? I assume it's those with more power and privilege at the university, which is kind of ironic. Currently, we have a pending motion for our faculty that recommends that diversity, equity, and inclusion work be added to the annual evaluation and to tenure and promotion processes. Again, we'll leave aside how we gauge equity and inclusion work and just talk about diversity. If maintaining your job is going to be significantly affected by how your scholarship, teaching, and service to the university connect with diversity, we better be able to give you a good working definition, not just a list of examples. Otherwise, we're asking for a lawsuit, among a host of many other problems. Is the zoologist who teaches courses on biodiversity teaching diversity? Of course. Unless we take the approach of, well, you know what we mean by diversity. What about the political scientist who teaches a multitude of different and competing political ideologies? You'd think that diverse ideas would count for diversity, but do they? Do I get points every time I teach world religions? After all, religion is always on the list of examples of diversity. If so, is that fair to the mathematicians? Or do they have to start talking about the contributions of some mathematician who is, what, not white, not Asian, not male? Then have they taught diversity? When people's jobs and incomes are on the line, having imprecise language is not your friend. Third, whatever all this is about, it seems clear that there is a good toward which we're all working. This is important. We want to encourage various types of diversity in order to facilitate learning and foster respect across differences. Yeah, I know there are some people who just want various forms of diversity so they can score points in some silly game, but let's go with our better angels here. When I teach world religions, my class is better when there is religious diversity in the classroom. Students coming from different traditions can shed light on the material and can discuss their respective religions from the perspective of an insider. They can educate one another and me in a way that the textbook cannot. And when it's one of their classmates, students see that religion personified in a way that isn't so other. And that's good. When I teach an ethics class and we're discussing issues like abortion, transgender issues, or the death penalty, that same religious diversity has real benefits for the class, as well as when the class has diversity of gender, sexuality, national origin, and of course, different viewpoints. Imagine teaching a course on American public policy, where all the students, the professor, and the readings were from one side of the political spectrum. You know, like a sociology class. Okay, relax, Provost Ramsaran, I'm just yanking your chain. But in all seriousness, that environment would not be conducive to a high-quality education. We need viewpoint diversity. Here's what it boils down to. What colleges and universities want is human diversity, and we want it for two big reasons. One, a plurality of viewpoints and perspectives helps us all learn. And 2, exposure to different types of people helps us learn how to get along across our human differences. That's it. That's the essential issue. But here's the essential problem. Our sloppy use of diversity often ends up being a mechanism to achieve the exact opposite. What happens is that faculty and administrators use the word diversity in narrow terms in order to provide benefits to those groups that they want to benefit, but only them. We don't want a full range of human diversity. We don't really want viewpoint diversity because that would be hard, and it would give a place at the table to people who might say things we disagree with. Don't believe me? I have never heard the faculty in any humanities department say, the next person we hire should be a conservative because there's just too much ideological and political groupthink in our department. Or even, that person disagrees with me on a lot of issues. Let's hire her. Still not convinced? Take a look at the speakers they bring to campus. They may come in a variety of shades and genders, but they rarely bring a viewpoint contrary to the campus orthodoxy. That is not diversity. All right. I know of no better way to end this screed than with the most important comment about education ever made by anyone. It comes from John Stuart Mill. He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be good, and no one may have been able to refute them. But if he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion. Nor is it enough that he should hear the opinions of adversaries from his own teachers, presented as they state them, and accompanied by what they offer as refutations. He must be able to hear them from the persons who actually believe them. He must know them in their most plausible and persuasive form. That's viewpoint diversity. Thank you.